Welcome to another episode of The Brand Called You, a podcast and podcast show that brings you leadership lessons, knowledge, experience, and wisdom from thousands of successful individuals from around the world. I'm your host, Ashutosh Garg, and today I'm delighted to welcome a senior and respected professional, an entrepreneur, and a friend from Bangalore, India, Mr. G. Shankaran Nair. Shankaran, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Ashutosh. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Shankaran is the partner of Slingshot Accelerator, amongst many, many other things that he has done. So, my first question for you, you describe yourself as a disruptor and an innovator. What shaped that mindset early in your career?
If I take a very narrow focus of what in my career shaped that mindset, then my answer would be, strangely enough, boredom.
Mm-hmm.
I
Okay.
did the usual gig, right? I went to
Mm-hmm.
business school and then I got campus recruited. I was a management trainee. I was fast tracked. I was in a good place. 4 years into my career, I was in a good place,
Mm-hmm.
running a branch, a big branch. And there was a dawning realization saying, this system has been around for like 70 years
Mm-hmm.
and it's going to keep running. And what exactly is it that you're doing that's going to make a difference? And I couldn't
Correct.
come up with an answer that satisfied me. And
Mm-hmm.
I had this strong urge to make a difference. And I didn't feel, I didn't know enough. I was still in my 20s,
Yeah.
right? And I'm working around a bunch of veterans who have been in the company for longer than I, all of them, all reporting to me, which I think, incidentally, which I think was a bad idea, but that's
Mm-hmm.
the way it was back then.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one answer. I figured I'm not making enough of an impact. I've got to go somewhere and do something where I feel that I'm the guy who's making a difference. But if I go back to my childhood, Ashutosh, I
Mm-hmm.
also think that I was blessed with parents who encouraged us to kind of think independently.
Mm-hmm.
We grew up in a very non-prescriptive environment. There were no boundaries and rules about the pursuit of knowledge, for want of a better word. We could
Mm-hmm.
contradict our parents, we could debate with them. Arguing was a basic pastime in the house.
Mm-hmm.
The only things that were cast in stone were value systems.
Correct.
Your integrity, you keep your word. My mother used to keep saying, "Walk tall, walk straight, and look the world in the eye." It's a poem she used to quote to me, but yeah, that's what.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
But then I got used to the idea that there is much to be learned. Even my parents are open to being corrected, which means they're
Mm-hmm.
still learning.
Correct.
And so I would like to keep learning and I want to keep trying something new and I have to evolve my own path. So that's the long answer to the
And that's a
question.
great response because, a lot of our viewers and listeners are young and, it's these words of wisdom which make a big difference in perspectives that we are all looking for. And you and I are the
Thank
same
you.
vintage. We discovered
Yes,
that
we
when we
are.
spoke some time back. But
Yeah.
Shankar, very early in your life, you became an entrepreneur, which when startups were not even talked about, you became a
Yes.
startup entrepreneur. Tell me about your first entrepreneurial venture as the bubblegum company and what lessons have stayed with you.
Again, interesting story about how this whole thing started, right? There I am sitting in my first job. I don't want to mention company
No,
names
fair
and
enough.
stuff, but one multinational corporation, big office, and we would walk across the road to have lunch at something
Hmm,
called the Drive-In Woodlands in Chennai,
hmm,
which is an
hmm,
institution.
hmm,
And I had just got a management trainee reporting to me a year back, and so the two of us would stroll across, and he pointed out to a strip of chewing gum that was
hmm,
hanging in one of the stores inside
hmm,
this
hmm,
restaurant. And he said, these guys, they're doing some great innovative stuff. And so I said, who are these guys? And I went and researched them. And I found that there were a bunch of IIM Calcutta guys mostly who had just set up this company. And then they advertised saying they're looking for people to come on board as part of the core founding team. So that's how it started.
hmm,
I kind of said, okay, here's a chance to be something very close to an entrepreneur. So when I met the team and I said that I'm not coming in as an employee, I want to be part of the founding team, and there were already three or four of them. That's the way it started, right? Um, so it was not that I had an idea that I want to do something. I had a product or a service. I piggybacked on somebody else's idea. The company was 3, 4 months old,
hmm,
and I jumped on board. That was my first entrepreneurial gig.
hmm.
But did you say what was the experience over
What
there?
was what were some of the lessons from this experience?
What were some of the lessons from this experience? Yeah, it's like an ocean. The
Hmm,
way I look at it is that it is not that I learned some. Yes, I did learn some things that are unique to an entrepreneurial
hmm,
experience,
hmm,
but a huge chunk of stuff that I learned, I would have learned in a job.
Hmm.
The only difference in my mind is that I would have learned those lessons in a corporate setting over 10 years.
Correct.
And I learned this in an entrepreneurial setting in 1 year.
Hmm.
It was a fast track learning
Yeah.
experience of all the, let's call it the tangible stuff.
Hmm.
How good a marketer are you? How good a sales guy are you? How good a leader are you? How good is your accounting skills? How,
Hmm.
so you get cross-functional exposure to every function in the organization because
Absolutely.
you're the core team. So that is a big chunk of learning. But to me now, and I guess this is my age speaking, to me now the more valuable part of that experience was it taught me who I am.
Hmm.
It taught me how I react in a crisis. It taught me how I respond to difficult decisions and there was no time to take decisions. It taught me
Correct.
how, in a scant information, bad information, somebody has to take a call. How do
Hmm.
I react? Do I cut and run or do I take the call? What happens when disaster strikes because of your call? Do you push the blame to somebody else or do you
Correct.
stand up tall and say, I took the call, guys. It's okay. It's my mistake. Let's
Hmm.
move on.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
those lessons were really invaluable
Hmm.
because as a leader in an entrepreneurial setup, there's no place to hide,
Correct.
right? And
Correct.
that's an experience the corporate world will not give you
Will
for a
never give
long
you.
time.
Will never give you. Absolutely. Absolutely. But, you know, you were an entrepreneur in India at a time before venture capital existed. How did you deal with failure in those early ventures when support systems were very limited?
It's scary tough. I
Hmm.
actually the answer is it's difficult to even explain how we survived. I mean, look at the
Hmm.
environment. Look at today and look at then. Back then, funds were only available from public sector banks. There
Yeah.
were no private sector banks. And there was this deep suspicion about anybody who wanted money to run a business. You know,
Hmm.
startups were not the darlings that they are
Correct.
today.
Correct.
Startups were people who apparently failed in everything else and have to now run a business. They're coming and
Absolutely.
borrowing money. And
Yeah.
there was a thicket of rules. Everybody looked down on us, including friends and family saying, what are you doing? You're from IIM. You were in
Hmm.
a cushy job. You were in a
Hmm.
multinational corporation.
Hmm.
You were flying around and using private taxis. Now you're in a bus and
Hmm.
you're going by train and all kinds of stuff. So it was almost demeaning to
Hmm.
be an entrepreneur back
Yeah.
in the day. And you had
Yeah.
to show success very quickly. If I were to single out one factor that helped us survive that, or make that two factors that survived us, it was the people around us.
Hmm.
I think as partners, we bonded and we had each other's backs and we drew strength from each other because
Hmm.
failure was inevitable.
Yeah.
We kept falling down, we kept getting up. You need
Hmm.
energy to get up and you fed off of each other. And the other thing that I think helped us a lot is all of us, we used to talk about this back in the day, we were all
Hmm.
young,
Hmm.
uh, that we all had stable home lives.
Hmm.
We had supportive families. We had people
Hmm.
who, but survival back in the day was not so much about what you knew as emotional survival.
Correct.
How you got up and came to work the next day, right? Were
Hmm.
you mentally strong enough to do the things you had to do? And I
Hmm.
think people, the team in the office, the partners, and the co-founders and family.
Hmm. Amazing.
That's what I learned.
Amazing. You also mentioned, when I was reading about you and preparing for my conversation, you mentioned learning in the furnace of practice. What business principle do you now hold as universally true because of the furnace of practice?
That's such a that's such a vast thing to really answer, right? Because there are so many things that you learned in the furnace of practice
Correct.
that may not be the principle that you now hold
True.
sacred, for want of a better word. So let
Yeah.
me start with the nitty-gritty and I'll come to the summary of where I am today,
Yeah.
right? Furnace of practice really meant, like I said, um, leadership skills, decision-making skills,
Hmm.
accountability, ownership, all of those things were honed in a place where there was no place to hide.
Correct.
So those were one reference to a furnace was the fact that time in an entrepreneurial setup kind of takes on a different meaning. It
Hmm.
telescopes. There is no tomorrow.
Yeah.
You have no money in the bank. You got to pay salaries. If you don't close the sale, then the salaries are not happening. So on and so forth. So it's
Hmm.
like it's a compressed experience. That's what I meant when I used the word furnace of practice,
Hmm.
right? It's not a slightly more relaxed corporate environment where
Yeah.
there is a system and a process and a team around you. That's what I think would be some of the principles that I picked up. Decision
Hmm.
making, leadership, accountability, quick decision making, ability to manage with scant information, all hold in the
Hmm.
furnace of practice. But now looking back, and I have no doubt and you probably hear this from me a couple of times in the rest of the time that we have, it's influenced also by my age today. I
Mm.
guess I've grown more emotional and more sensitive to things other than corporate success, but
And wise.
I hope.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. So to me, it's all about people.
Yeah.
To me, the core business principle, which I think businesses should bear in mind, is that you're here to serve society, you're here to
Correct.
serve humanity. This
Correct.
is not about, valuations and cashing out and stuff. And
Correct.
when I say people, I don't mean just your team. I mean
Hmm.
team, your customers, your investors, your banker, your supply chain, society at large. Are you a force for the good? Are you
Hmm.
somebody that is going to make a change in the world that you inhabit? I mean,
Hmm.
it's not that we did anything that impacted even a country.
Hmm.
Maybe we impacted a city.
Correct.
Maybe impacted a locality in
Correct.
some small fashion. We hired
Correct.
people, we trained people, we gave them best practices in a variety of things in their lives. So
Hmm.
for me, it's now people. And I think one of my fears now, Ashutosh, rightly or wrongly, is with AI coming in, I fear for people,
Hmm.
perhaps irrationally, but
Yeah.
yeah.
What a great response. Tell me, how has your view of leadership evolved over the years? And difficult question I'm going to ask you, but what separates a good entrepreneur from a great one?
Mm. I'll take the second one first,
Okay.
because a thought popped into my mind, right?
Yeah.
Uh, Entrepreneurs, the great ones, are nearly irrational human beings.
Hmm.
They have this irrational, fanatical belief in their product, their service, their company,
Hmm.
themselves.
Hmm.
And that is required.
Hmm.
And sometimes it blinds them. But good entrepreneurs have that. A part of
Correct.
our role these days, working out of Slingshot, is to kind of
Hmm.
open their eyes to the slightly less fanatical views that are
Correct.
available, right? And to convince them that, look, world doesn't start and end with you. It's great you have the belief,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
look at the market around here. Yeah. So they have that. So they're a paradox. They're so locked in and they're so convinced that we are successful. At the same time, they're very open.
Hmm.
That makes a great entrepreneur. You can
Hmm.
have a conversation, you can provoke thinking, you can ask them to look around and learn from outside, which they'll do it
Hmm.
quickly. So that's one
Hmm.
facet. It's
Yeah.
kind of an open shut combination.
Hmm.
I wouldn't want an entrepreneur who's not irrationally convinced that I'm the best thing since ice cream.
Correct.
I would want the guy to believe that. But I
Hmm.
also want him to be open, saying, hey, this thing is probably better than ice cream.
Hmm.
And that is a paradoxical combination.
Hmm.
That's one. Second thing is they're quick. Decisions are quick because they're
Yeah.
used to not referring, discussing, so on and so forth. Again, a paradox. And it's interesting how some of these qualities are paradoxical in nature.
Hmm.
They are the same entrepreneur who's quick and pretty closed in his mind is also, I've seen within his team, small as it may be, 10 people, 15 people,
Hmm.
is very consultative.
Yeah.
The great entrepreneur will ask his team, I
Hmm.
got this idea. What do you think? How do we do this? And he'll defer to them and he'll get the best idea and then he'll take the call.
Hmm.
He will do the tie break. He will, because there'll be multiple opinions and he'll explain why he's doing the tie break.
Hmm.
So that ability to again consult, to be collaborative, to be quick, to make the
Hmm.
decision,
Hmm.
and to kind of provide that leadership in times of uncertainty. The guy who
Hmm.
stands up and has an internal locus of control, if you want to call
Hmm.
it that.
Hmm.
That's the third quality that I've
Yeah.
seen. Who hits a disaster and says, yes, something hit me that was totally unexpected. I accept that. But there were
Hmm.
some other things that I did that I could have done better.
Hmm.
I look for that internal locus of control.
Yeah.
As opposed to there are many people who will say, I couldn't do anything about it. It was all the fault of something happened. Somebody else did something. My team let me down. My suppliers let me down, so on and so
Hmm.
forth.
Hmm.
So an internal locus of control. These are factors that I've seen that makes a great entrepreneur.
Hmm.
I'm sorry, I'm going to
Interesting.
ask you to repeat the first half of the
Yeah, and
question.
my first part was that how has your view of leadership evolved across your entrepreneurial journey?
I entered my leadership career, unfortunately, in my opinion. You remember all the crap about us being
Hmm.
crown princes of Indian
Yeah.
industry back in the 70s, which I never bought into, right?
Yeah.
I was a wet behind the ears kid thrust into a leadership position in a large
Correct.
corporation. And I felt terrible for the 20-year veteran sales supervisor who was suddenly reporting to this guy who doesn't know how to spell sales.
Hmm.
So I started my leadership career with a strong imposter syndrome, saying, I don't know
Hmm.
what I'm doing here, right?
Correct.
This
Correct.
other guy should be right. So from that level, through sheer furnace of practice, if you will, my leadership views now are more close to a concept that a professor who did some consulting with us, probably heard of
Hmm.
Dr. Atreya,
Hmm.
Calcutta-based management guru.
Yeah, I worked with him, Munjatreya, yes.
Oh, you did work with him.
Hmm. Hmm.
So I thought it was one of the best compliments I received. He watched me at work. He engaged with us doing our vision mission in Servion, and he said, "You practice servant leadership." And
Hmm.
I said, "Sir, I have no idea what that is."
Hmm.
He said, "Well, you don't need to have any idea. That's what you do, which is that
Amazing.
your view is in life is that you're here to enable your people to perform." I think
Hmm.
I arrived at that by default without reading too much about it.
Hmm.
Because, we ended up being fairly senior. I mean, very senior in your case,
Yeah.
and you had therefore a bunch of people reporting to you who are very senior themselves.
Hmm.
So your job now becomes merely getting the right guy and enabling them,
Hmm.
which means your job was to support the guy, not to dominate the guy. That's
Hmm.
the way I look at it now.
Yeah.
At
Yeah.
this stage in my life, it might not be the same when you're starting your career, but now I'm a servant leader. I'm here to serve my team. If my team succeeds, I succeed. If they fail, I'm willing to stand up and take the rap.
Correct.
That's my leadership style.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Very well said. Great response. Shankaran, a few minutes back, you talked about the Slingshot Accelerator, and that's a great segue to my next set of questions. Tell me about the Slingshot Accelerator. What led you to co-found it, and how does it differ from a traditional consulting firm?
Once again, almost serendipity, right? We sold our last company. We all overlapped. The four
Hmm.
partners of Slingshot overlapped in a company called Servion Global Solutions,
Hmm.
where we were all, for want of a better word, entrepreneurs. The
Hmm.
original founders brought us in as stakeholders, and I was always treated like a founder. When we sold out, literally a week later, one of the companies that we had been talking to for a partnership out of Servion, who
Hmm.
therefore knew us, the founder CEO, tiny company at that time, reached out and said, "I need help with a bunch of stuff. Can you come on board?" That's how it started. That was my
Hmm.
first client. I didn't even
Hmm.
know I was going to have a client.
Hmm.
One thing led to the other, and we were our pipeline, sales pipeline, and we were doing no sales, was full in
Hmm.
the sense people
Hmm.
kept calling and saying, "Can you do this? Can you do that?"
Hmm.
I roped in some of my old team, so to speak, my friend,
Hmm.
co-conspirators from
Yeah.
Service, and
Yeah.
we were engaging with these clients, and we realized that uh, we just make it inconvenient for our customers
Hmm.
because they got to get into contracts with each of us. Let's form a company.
Yeah.
There seems to be no dearth of demand.
Yeah.
We are well liked. We are successful. Our early vision back in the day when we realized that it was startups that are coming to us because of our entrepreneurial mindsets
Hmm.
was that, okay, let's go out there and see if we can move the needle on this 90% mortality rate in the startup industry. Let's
Hmm.
have a really ambitious rule saying nobody who engages with us should fail.
Correct.
We went out with that mindset, and so we got excited about it, and we started
Amazing.
building this company. The second part of the question is an interesting one because one
Hmm.
of the things that we truly believe in is that advisory and consulting services should not stop at the wisdom, as it may be, such as it may be, or experience of the deliverer of that
Hmm.
advice.
Hmm.
It has to go beyond that because mere dipping into my experience is not going to enable a client to perform in his sphere, whatever that is,
Hmm.
or
Hmm.
sphere, whatever that may be. So
Yeah.
the point really here is, can we bring it to a kind of a system where we transfer knowledge?
Hmm.
Now, if you want to transfer knowledge, there has to be a body of work, which is
Correct.
knowledge, which is separate from your experience, right? Your experience
Yeah.
informs that body of knowledge, your wisdom informs that body of knowledge, but then you're now delivering a body of knowledge to your clients. That
Hmm.
was an evolution, Ashutosh. We didn't
Hmm.
start that way. We started the
Absolutely.
other way. We
Right.
started saying, I've done 40 years in business. Tell me what you want and I can do it for you. So
Hmm.
my first client would say, I have a client meeting in Bombay. I can't make it. You go.
Hmm.
That was the first thing. That is okay. That's your experience. I know you've sold for a million years and so you can handle this and I trust you. Go.
Very
Uh,
interesting. Very
but
interesting.
we realized that's not scalable.
Hmm.
Then you're limited by what you know as well. So
Correct. Correct.
today, to the second part of your question, the way Slingshot works is that we do a knowledge transfer. We do a training, we do a
Hmm.
hand holding, we
Hmm.
take them through a cycle of execution using that body of knowledge, which breaks the body of knowledge is broken down beyond the body of knowledge into processes, templates, and we give them homework and we make them work their way through it. And we kind of, it's like running almost an educational institution. We should think of
Hmm.
certifying them saying, And it's all built
Yeah.
around positioning and strategy,
Yeah.
which is our,
Absolutely.
yeah.
I understand. Well said. You also said that you focus on startups and tech SMEs navigating AI disruption. What patterns do you see among companies that adapt successfully?
So the tech SME, just to color in the background before I answer your question,
Mm,
Ashutosh, the tech SME kind of happened,
mm,
right? Because again, people heard about us from various sources, and
mm,
NASSCOM reached out to us,
mm,
and they said, we are doing this AI champion cohort.
mm.
Can you come in and work with them? Because they fall into the description that you just said.
Yeah.
Companies facing disruption. The whole
Correct.
purpose of NASSCOM running this AI cohort was to help them to deal with this.
Right.
And so that we partnered with NASSCOM. We are the only partner in this program, AI Chat.
Mm,
We are into our second cohort ending and hopefully a third cohort to follow. And so we kind of slanted our body of work to also cater to this segment. I think
mm,
this the other part of, so that's how we got into it. That's the background information. What qualities do we see? For two things to that, two answers to that first question. The first is there's a universal awareness and, if I might say so, anxiety
mm.
around this disruption. So it is
Yeah.
not that we are having to convince people that boss, life is going to change and it's going to
Mm.
change dramatically, and it might even be fatal
Right.
for your
Right.
organization. That convincing work we don't have to do.
Mm,
Everybody who's coming to us is aware of it, right?
mm,
And so the awareness is universal. The how to deal with it is where we struggle to translate that into a set of coherent plans and policies and programs and strategy and
mm,
all of that. Now, in that second box, what is the nature of organizations who are more successful, which is your question. Once again, founders who are very open.
mm,
We deal only with founders and CEOs in this cohort, and there
mm.
are this bunch of people who will come and say, I need to understand how to do this.
Correct.
I'm reading this, I'm thinking about this. What do you think? That's the tribe that learns quickly. The other tribe comes in and says, I know what I'm doing, this is what I'm going to do.
Mm,
Certify it for me. And inevitably we get into an argument saying, no, you haven't thought this through. That's not going to work. You need to go through a process, etc. So this open closed paradox to me is the hardest one to break.
mm. Very
And
interesting.
one. And the second thing is the former group, the guys who are open, are also quick to pivot.
Mm.
They don't dilly-dally.
Yeah.
Once they're convinced, they take the ball, they pick up the ball, and then they're constantly coming back and forth saying, I'm doing this, I'm doing this. Am I in
Mm,
line with what you're saying?
mm,
How would you do this? And so on and so forth. So
mm,
speed of
mm,
action,
mm.
openness, ability to pivot the company quickly, carry
Very
people
interesting.
along.
Very
Yeah.
interesting. A few minutes back, you were talking about uh, how we've all evolved towards the ultimate, which is the human being and
Yes.
people-related challenges that organizations face. And therefore, my next question is, how do you see the role of human creativity evolving in the age of an AI-driven um, environment most enterprises are facing?
I mean, um, given the time, the era that we're living in, I kind of felt that this question will come. So
Mm,
the first thing that I need to tell you is that I really don't think I'm competent to even talk about AI because I'm
yeah,
not an AI guy. I
sure,
want that to be clear.
sure.
But I am a person who is, I think, reasonably intelligent living in the AI era, and I've been in business for 45 years. So I do have opinions.
Correct.
I just want whoever is listening to this to know that
Absolutely right.
this is
Yes.
this could be completely wrong. But
Mm,
here's
mm,
where I
mm,
am on this. I see AI as going to be obviously stupendously disruptive
mm,
to the human race.
mm,
I think AI is going to disrupt in two buckets. And to my layperson's mind, it's going to disrupt in two buckets.
mm,
One is it's going to hit at the productivity, automation, and therefore the decimation of jobs level,
mm,
where it's all about efficiency and doing more with less and whatever. The world has done this before.
mm.
AI is not the first shiny new toy that is going to hit productivity.
Absolutely.
Started with the Industrial Revolution and the
Yeah.
Agricultural
Yeah.
Revolution, all of
Yeah.
that. So we've seen this several times.
Mm,
Now we've got this AI thing is going to repeat that, perhaps at a scale and a speed that we've never seen before. That's
correct.
my view. On the creativity front, I think we're seeing this for the first time.
Mm,
I think we're seeing it for the first time that a shiny new toy is going to mimic our creativity
mm,
behavior,
mm,
right? And I think that it can go one of two ways. Either human beings stay in control of this and use the native capabilities of AI to
mm,
enhance our own creativity, which is
mm.
a possibility.
Yeah.
I, I, I do that. I fancy myself as a decent writer, but thanks to one of my partners, I've off late started putting my drafts through the AI. It sometimes improves it, it sometimes doesn't, but at least I have a partner in crime and I can see that there is a value. So it enhances my creativity. But the other thing can equally happen. It's a shortcut, right? And I keep reading about people whose CVs are so obviously fully CV AI generated at a very grunge level, where you shut off your creativity. And that danger is very real.
Correct.
And I think I tend to see the dark side of the moon, also a rock music fan. So I tend to see the dark side of the moon. And I think that given human history, I think we will go down the latter path. And that's my fear, which is that we will become less creative. And I think we will, and as a result, we probably can lose the race for supremacy to the thing that we have created.
Correct. Amazing. Time for one more question for you. And that is that, you speak of the final quest in discovering who we truly are. Tell me about this final quest and how has entrepreneurship brought you closer to that understanding?
It's life happens, Ashutosh. So it is not just the entrepreneurship, but the entrepreneurship certainly played a major chunk in that. But while you're entrepreneuring, you are also living a life, and things happen in both spheres. These are the two major spheres of your existence, so to speak, that color your views and shape you as a person, and all of that. And one of the things that I think life and entrepreneurship have taught me is a degree of self-awareness. I think this is something that is to be treasured. Are you truly self-aware? I think a lot of us also practice self-deception because that's the way we survive.
Correct.
The organism protects itself from dissonance by practicing self-deception, and so we practice that. Self-awareness goes the other way, saying you're truly aware of who you are, right? And you are also aware of how you deal with life, how you process life, and when I say life, I mean everything that happens on a day-to-day basis. So both have stripped you down. In my case, life too has, and that's a separate conversation. But in the case of entrepreneurship, as I said, there's no place to hide. Unlike in maybe where you have a big team and you're part of a large engine, it's a corporate giant engine where you can kind of say, the team word is this, that. This brings you down to saying that whatever has happened here, I own it. You're aware that some things happen that are not due to you, which are out of your control. That happens. There are things, fate intervenes. God kicks your butt every now and then. And you couldn't do anything about it. But that alters your reality. That altered reality is still yours. You can't disown the new reality. It's yours. You might disown how it happened. So the fundamental realization that entrepreneurship gives you, which I think is a life lesson, is whatever happens and whatever S happens, it's yours. Pick it up, deal with it, mold it into something new. Do you have what it takes to do that? And this S can be the S that I intended or the S of success. You can pick it up and mold it and become whatever you want with that as well. And people deal with success badly too. Right? So I think that entrepreneurship kind of gives you that chance to figure out who you are when the chips are down. Over and over and over and over again, it gives you that chance.
Correct. Well said. And on that note, Shankaran, I just want to say what a fabulous conversation this one has been. Thank you for talking to me about your own incredible journey. You started as an entrepreneur very early in life. I started my entrepreneurship journey when I was 46. And everything that you were talking about related with me, though much later in life.
That's good to know.
Great pointers for my viewers and listeners, a lot of whom are very young. Thank you again for sharing so many of your thoughts with us, and good luck to you.
Thank you for having me, Ashutosh. Enjoyed the conversation.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to the Brand Called You videocast and podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website www.tbcy.in to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for the Brand Called You.